Okay, so yeah, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to Pegaperks. Today is a pleasure to have Natalia Villavicencio with us from the Universidad de O'Higgins in Chile. She's going to be talking about late quaternary extinctions in South America, different approaches, one quest. Um, so before we proceed to the talk itself, for those familiar with Pegaperks seminars format, we're going to start with this short welcome and announcements, just a few slides, and then proceed to the talk itself, which is going to be followed by a moderated Q&A for about 10 minutes. And after that, we're going to have a tea time, informal chat with Natalia. And just the first reminder that you can send your questions via the chat to our questions host, and that today is going to be Elizabeth. Before we proceed, we want to thank the Quaternary Research Association for sponsoring this talk. So it's a pleasure to have them among our sponsors. We also thank the other sponsors for supporting us. So a little bit of housekeeping. Paleoperks values the participation of everyone interested in the paleosciences. So please remember to abide by our code of conduct. If you haven't done so and ended up in this talk today, please go to our website and do it. Also, please remember to remain muted during the talk. If you are able to mute yourself, please don't do that. You shouldn't be able to do this right now, but if you do, please remain muted. Second reminder that you can send your questions to Natalia via the chat. So send the questions to our questions host. Today is Elizabeth. We also have the option to raise the hand, to use the raise hand function. You can find that in one of the buttons down below in the bar. We also have captions into Zoom. You can press the little CC button on the button as well to show or hide them. And we invite people to nominate early career researchers in the paleosciences. It can be someone you know, someone that you think is an outstanding early career researcher, or you can nominate yourself. You're going to see a link for that in the chat in a few seconds. And also a reminder that we have a weekly feedback for demographic information. It's always important for us to know who is attending our seminars. So it's anonymous, it's optional, but it's very much encouraged. We still have a 2022 participation feedback survey going on. So if you have a cell phone, you can scan the QR code to access that. But I think you're gonna also see the link for that in the chat. So finally, to introduce Natalia, today's speaker, she did a bachelor in biology at the Pontificia Universidad Católica in Santiago, Chile, followed by a PhD in integrative biology at the University of California, Berkeley, in the US. And she's currently a postdoc at the Universidad de O'Higgins in Chile. So with that, I would like to invite Natalia to take over the screen share and start the talk.
Okay, thank you very much for this introduction and for hosting me.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is great. So my title already said, I'm gonna be here talking about late quaternary extinctions in South America. And as many of you probably know, we refer to the late quaternary extinction event as the time during the late quaternary was exactly, let's say, between 50,000 and 8,000 years ago. That was a time where a lot of large mammals around the world became extinct. And basically, this extinction event was more like it was affecting mostly larger mammals. And in this figure, it is shown how the size groups, the largest size groups of mammals in different continents were completely affected by this extinction event. For example, in North America, we have that everything weighing over a ton disappeared. In Northern Eurasia was the same. Australia was even more severe. And in South America, we have everything over 300 kilograms becoming extinct during this event. Africa seems to be the exception. to this rule. And here, even if we see some extinctions, is not as severe as in other continents on the planet. So here is to show again maybe the same concept that we have here in this greenish color, all the surviving taxa, and in black, all the extinct taxa for the different continents. And we can see how South America and North America, for example, were greatly affected by this extinction, while other places like Africa were not as impacted as the rest of the planet. So the quest I'm presenting here is, of course, trying to understand what killed these animals and what killed them in South America specifically. And the possible causes that are always discussed around this extinction are many. Here is a table that shows many of them, ones that are being discussed or that were discussed at some time in history, but we have some environmental hypotheses, some human-related hypotheses, usually related to hunting by humans, hunting of these animals by humans. We have some severe hunting scenarios like overkill, for example. And also some combined hypotheses that try to mix some of these all together, trying to explain these extinctions in the planet. So usually this is a figure from a research article that tries to understand the debate around late quaternary extinctions through time. So basically what they did, it was basically to analyze around 100 of publications related to quaternary extinctions and try to see where they fit in this landscape where we have anthropic, environmental, and biotic causes of extinction as the possible drivers for this phenomena. And we can see that through history from 1665 to present times, most of the literature, the scientific literature, is discussing anthropic causes of extinction and environmental causes of extinction more than anything else. And I think this is the case that has been going on maybe for the last 60 years, where we are always discussing were humans or environmental changes what killed these animals or not. And of course, one of the most incipient causes of extinction is climate or environmental changes. And what happened is that during the late Pleistocene, we went from last glacial period to the current interglacial. And this was not only a change of climate and temperature, but also changes in vegetation, but also it implied changes in vegetation and in other environmental factors. So that's one of the possible causes that is usually discussed in the literature. And the other one is human impacts on the landscape. So also a different something that was different during the last the late Pleistocene and the transition to the Holocene, it was that humans were migrating out of Africa and going to everywhere else. So they went to Europe, let's say about 45,000 years ago, and they traveled through Asia and they reached South America, let's say between now 16,000, 15,000 years ago. This is, of course, being discussed all the time. When was the time that they first came? But that's the general picture. And of course, is this idea that these humans were hunting, they were following a large game or big game to hunt them and killing them, and also making other things on the landscape that could have affected these animals. So, as I said, this debate and the debate among climate change and humans as possible drivers of this extinction is a debate that has been going on for the last 6 decades at least, and is usually like what is compared when we think about when these animals became extinct and why they became extinct. And this figure is showing basically that is comparing in different places, in different continents, the magnitude of extinction, here represented by the number of genera that went extinct, and comparing that, the timing of that, here represented by these numbers, with what we know about human arrivals, represented by the red boxes, and climate changes, represented by the blue shaded areas. So with this figure, just try to show that the magnitude and the timing of the different possible drivers was different among continents. And in this scenario, this global context, we have that South America, just go back. South America was one of the most affected ones. Is the continent that lost maybe the greater amount of species and genera compared to the others, and is also a place where a human arrival and climate changes seem to overlap in time. They are very close in time. So it offers the opportunity to test maybe synergistic effects, or these two causes combined, to test if they are combined were maybe greater in causing some of these extinctions. So just to show you the magnitude of this extinction with nice pictures of animals, this is how the diversity of large mammals was, let's say, more than 10,000 years ago in South America. So we have many species of giant ground sloths, for example, or many species of these, some sort of giant armadillos, the cingulates. We have also proboscideans. We have the ungulates from the south that were not present in other, they were never present in any other place, like toxodons and macrauchinia, for example. And this is what it remains at present. So the largest mammal that we have at present in South America is the tapir from the Amazon, which is about 200 kilograms in size, and everything else became extinct. Here is not that we still have saber-toothed cats, but we still have a large felix. It's just representing that group. But yeah, I think that this image shows like how severe was the extinction and how we lost some forms that are not present, no longer present in any other place on the planet. So as I said, South America was the most affected continent. Around 83% of genera of large mammals became extinct. Again, human impacts and climate changes are close in time, and we are still trying to look for an answer, like between these two factors, and maybe also considering other factors. So the different approaches I want to show today are basically what I did for my PhD, that was analyzing chronologies of extinction in South America and its relation to environmental changes and the presence of humans or not. And the second approach I'm going to discuss is something I did in my first postdoc, that it was using species distribution models along with the fossil record to also see some things about the extinction process in South America. So starting with the first one, as I said, this was part of my work as a graduate student, and at that time I became part of this group that was trying to improve the chronology of extinction for South American large mammals and at the same time analyze that chronology of extinction and try to see what was happening in South America during the late Pleistocene. So one of the things we did was to collect data from the literature and also to improve the data that exists, especially related to megafaunal dates or radiocarbon dates on extinct megafauna. So we did a lot of radiocarbon dating as well. But basically what we needed was to have radiocarbon dates on extinct megafauna to know when these animals were present and when they became extinct or when they disappeared from different regions in the continent. Another set of data we needed was to know when humans were present or not and what were they doing in the different places on the continent. So that's why we collected or we made a data set of archaeological dates, and also analyze environmental data or data that could tell us something about vegetation changes or changes in the landscape, such as pollen and charcoal records in the continent. And with that information, we did several regional analyses that I'm going to show now. But yeah, let's say, so this is a picture of all the radiocarbon data we had, that it's a bit over 280 radiocarbon dates now. These are direct dates on extinct megafauna. That is radiocarbon dates on bone, skin, or dung from these animals. And as you can see, there are some areas in the continent that seem to have more data. So are the areas we chose to analyze in more detail, just because of that. Some of these analyses have already been published, and I'm going to talk about them now. And I'm going to start with Southern Patagonia. This is like our golden star, golden area in the continent because it has a lot of data. So decades of research in this area have provided us with over 100 radiocarbon dates on extinct megafauna, and there is also good environmental records of vegetation changes and changes in climate, as well as good records of archaeological sites that show the first humans that were living here along with this extinct megafauna. So just to show where this data is mostly coming from, we have two areas in southern Patagonia. One is here in Última Esperanza, where a Mylodon cave is found and other caves are found. And the other one, located to the east side of southern Patagonia, is this volcanic field called Paliaiki. So yeah, these are the types of fossils that can be found at those places. Cueva del Milodon is famous because skin of Mylodon was found here, a giant ground sloth, and also dung, and not only dung from Mylodon, but also from other animals as saber-toothed cats, for example, and also some beautiful bones of different species of animals. So when we compile all these radiocarbon dates from these two sites, and we compare them to what was happening on the landscape, this is what we see. So in this graph, each of these dots is a radiocarbon date on extinct megafauna, and extant as well, and also in humans. So here we have the radiocarbon record for humans for Última Esperanza and Paliaiki. We have records of climate change. This is the temperature changes estimated from a core from Antarctica. And also we have some estimations of changes in vegetation that come from pollen cores, which were retrieved from places very near to the places where the fossils are coming from. So everything is very regional or very local. We estimated, as we know, as everybody in this room knows, the fossil record is imperfect. So in an effort to try to correct that imperfection, we estimated these this probability distribution around the last appearance date and the early or the first appearance date for humans, in the case of humans, for all these species, using this GRIM analysis. So that's what these distributions are. It's an estimated last appearance date and an estimated first appearance date for humans. And also here, I just draw the line of the beginning of the Holocene, just to compare the different regions and see in what regions animals disappear first or they last, and they made it through the transition and to the Holocene. So we can see here, for example, yes, that here we have some taxa. These are all the extinct taxa: giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, an extinct jaguar, bears and horses and camelids. We can see some few things, like, for example, in this case, Mylodon is the taxa that tends to survive longer in the area and that becomes extinct later when vegetation changes have happened and we have the forest already established. At the beginning, all this area was more open and more grassland, and the transition is from that condition to a more forested one. So Mylodon seems to survive longer, but anyway becomes extinct at some point. We see how many of the herbivores seem to disappear at the time when the vegetation was transitioning. And we also see that there are like maybe 4,000 years of coexistence in this landscape between humans and these extinct taxa. For this particular area, we know that humans were using some of these animals. We cannot know if they were actively hunting them, but there are some bones of horses and Mylodon that have cut marks made with human tools, with stone tools, for Ultima Esperanza, for example. So we know that there was some interaction between humans and Mylodon and Hippirion, which is a horse, and some of the llamas that also became extinct. We also know that humans and the large carnivores were using the same caves, probably not at the same time, but maybe they were competing for that resource. And we also see that apparently the first warming didn't affect most of the taxa, but most of them did become extinct during the second warming in this area. So those are the kinds of clues we can get from this type of analysis. The same, for example, for the Argentinian and Uruguayan Pampas. This is still a place of open landscape, of grassland, but it also suffers some vegetation changes. This is the radiocarbon record we have for different species of megafauna in this area. Here is a human arrival in that area, and we see again several thousand years of coexistence between humans and this extinct megafauna on the landscape. And we also see how some of them survive very late after the beginning of the Holocene, and how most of them disappear during the time or after the time of major vegetation changes in the area. And finally, in the high Andean region of the Altiplano, this is a place over 3,000 meters above sea level. We analyzed the radiocarbon record of a few sites that we have in this area. And what we see is, what is different, I guess, here is that most of the taxa, we have very few dates, so this can change tomorrow, but as far as we can see, None of these extinct animals survives after the Holocene, and it seems that there was no coexistence in this landscape between extinct megafauna and the humans that colonized that area. Even we can see maybe a slight overlap. There are no evidence that these animals were used by humans. There are no archaeological sites that show that humans were using some of these animals and nothing like that. So in this area, yeah, it seems that animals became extinct earlier than the time when humans arrived, and they also became extinct during a time of major environmental changes in the altiplano. So as a summary, what we are seeing is that in South America, some regions show earlier disappearance when we compare it with others. In general, for example, these two regions have the coexistence between humans and extinct megafauna in the area for quite some time. And we also, when we look at the continental picture, we can see how some taxa tend to disappear earlier from the record, while others, like Xenarthrans, tend to remain alive until later. So now going to with the second approach, with species distribution models. As you might know, the way we make species distribution models is using presence data for different taxa, can be vegetal or animal, and mix that with environmental layers that basically tell us the conditions where these different organisms are living. And using that information, we make a model that we can project to see the potential current distribution, for example, or project to see how this potential distribution change through time, to the past or into the future. So what we did was to use the radiocarbon data set we already have to build species distribution models for extinct megafauna in South America, and try to explore the role of environmental changes, climate changes alone, in driving some of these extinctions. And this is just pictures of my collaborators in this project. I'm not going to go very deeply into the methods because these have already been published and maybe you can look at them there. But basically what we did was to use our radiocarbon data sets and maybe improve them with other sources of data. We use this software PaleoView to download information about temperature, precipitation, and make our climatic layers to finally make our models using MaxEnt and other statistical tools that you usually do in making these models. And at the beginning, what has already been published is that we did this for 4 species of horses, just to start with. These 4 species of horses have some quite good record in the continent, radiocarbon dated record. Some are better, others are less better, but we explore the four different species. These are the records of presence and absence. And then we did the models. So here in these animations, you can see how we can see changes in the potential distribution of these 4 species, going from 21,000 years before present to the present, just to see if at some point there is no like good sites for them to live in the continent. And what we saw is that that never happened. So there is always some potential area where these animals could live, just thinking about a climatic niche, just considering climatic conditions alone. But what we do see is that, of course, there are sometimes, as we are approaching to the Holocene, that where we can see that these potential areas of distribution are greatly reduced, or really, trimmed. But yeah, next step we took, okay, so we see changes in potential areas of distribution. We see that they are shrinking through time, especially when we are approaching the Holocene. But how can we tell if this is actually a greater risk of extinction or not? So what we did, it was to calculate minimum viable areas. That is basically calculate the number of areas, or let's say a minimum viable area is the minimum amount of landscape you must have to have one viable population of a species, of a mammal species. So this was calculated using home range estimates for these extinct taxa, knowing the number of individuals that a population of these different taxa must have in order to survive and escape extinction, and use the species distribution models to know how many of these areas were present at different times during our run. So here are the changes of these minimum viable areas through time from 21,000 to the present. And again, we see that there is no time, at least for these four horse species, there is no time where like they don't have any area left to have a viable population. They never approach to this red line, that means that you are extinct below that. But again, we see some drops, some large drops in the number of areas that were available for them, mostly between 11,000 and 9,000 years before present. That's the time where we see the largest drops. And we did the same exercise for other extinct taxa. Here are again the distribution, the species distribution models for this taxa. We don't see any of these taxa becoming extinct or crashing because there is no more area left for them, more climatic area left for them, to say it in some way. We do see that some taxa are always in the brink of extinction, like Mylodon, for example, or the carnivores. In this case, this Patagonian jaguar. And making the same exercise of calculating or estimating the risk of extinction through the calculation of minimum viable areas. What we see is that some of these taxa here highlighted in red presented like a higher risk of extinction, given like a major reduction in the number of minimum viable areas we can see through time. And usually this drop in that number happens between 11,000 and 9,000 years before present, which is actually the time we know from the radiocarbon record, is the time when we know that most of the last appearances dates for these taxa happened. So something was maybe happening there. And it's also a time window when we know that humans were almost everywhere in the continent. So this figure shows different time windows where we find archaeological sites in different parts of the continent. So you can see that between 16,000 and 15,000 years ago, only 2 sites are recorded for the continent. But as we go to the present, we can see how the number of archaeological sites increases, and how between 11,000 and 9,000 years before present, where most of these extinctions happened, humans are almost everywhere in the continent, from the Amazon to southern Patagonia to the high Andes. They are everywhere. So again, we need more. We are trying to find more ways to include this human factor in our models and try to get to more robust answers in this picture of megafaunal extinctions. And I know I'm already at 30 minutes, but I just, some conclusions again, I already said this. according to our approach, climate change alone cannot explain any of the extinctions because we don't see any of these potential areas of distribution crashing at some point. They never disappear. There is always some space left, climatically speaking, where these taxa could survive. But however, we see important changes just in the time window where we know that most of these animals became extinct according to the radiocarbon record for this taxa. So just to quickly show that I'm also working on excavations, I think it's nice to highlight that while you're in your computer just crunching some numbers and doing the stuff, you are also gathering more new information because we need more information about these extinct animals and their relation to humans and environmental changes to answer some of these questions. So I have the privilege to collaborate in two places here in Chile where we are excavating and trying to get more data. One is in central Chile and the other one is in the Atacama Desert. So at the Atacama Desert, we have found in one specific place, Quebrada Maní, which is a place that we know the first human populations of the Atacama Desert were present around 12,800 years ago. These are the first humans that were living in the driest place on Earth. And they were hunting some animals. We don't have clue, only animals that are still present, no extinct megafauna. But there are some records of extinct megafauna in the same area that we are excavating. This image actually is from last September, that we're trying to excavate this giant ground sloth, which is around 17,000 years old. And yeah, we have found horses, for example, and also canids, that this one is coming published soon, we hope. And basically, yeah, we have extinct fauna coexisting with extant fauna and not coexisting with humans so far, but we are investigating on that. And the other side is Tahuatahua in central Chile, where we are also excavating a site that has humans and extinct megafauna involved. But from this side, we know humans were using this extinct fauna for eating and for other purposes. And they were not only using extinct megafauna, but also like a diverse array of extant fauna as well. So this is a nice example that humans were using everything, not only hunting the big ones, but also the small ones like rodents and amphibians. Although these amphibians were pretty large, like over 2 kilograms of weight, but anyway, they were using all sorts of resources in this landscape. And to show the people I work with, we are excavating every year since 2019. Trying to understand better this relationship between humans and extinct megafauna and small fauna as well. And yes, trying just to get more data to answer the big question that I prompted to you today, that is what killed the megafauna. We still don't know, and we are still looking for answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Natalia. It was a fantastic talk. Yeah, I was very impressed by some of the data. So yeah, thank you very much for your talk. We're going to proceed with the Q&A, question and answers. We already have some questions here, but I would like to remember people that if you want to ask Natalia a question, just send a question via the chat or raise your hand using the reactions button. Okay, so the first question, I'm just letting you know, Natalia, I'm going to copy and paste them in the chat as well, just make sure you understand them correctly. So the first one from Keisendur Sawan, just pasting it in the chat. So what is the cause of clustering of sampling sites in the South American megafauna radiocarbon record? Is it human bias towards these sites, or is it related to depositional settings?
Okay, yeah. So it might be a little both, but for example, In the case of southern Patagonia, which is like our golden standard for South America, or what we would hope to have everywhere, there is a very good preservation of fossils at those sites. There are caves, they are cold, they are well preserved. When we compare that with the Pampas, for example, which is the place located in where Buenos Aires is in Argentina, um, even if we have like a huge amount of fossils coming from there, like the whole diversity of late Pleistocene megafauna, all the knowledge around that comes from that place. Preservation is not very good in terms of radiocarbon dating of collagen, for example. So we are always trying to get radiocarbon dates from collagen because it's like the best you can get. And for the case of the Pampas, I know some people who have tried, let's say, I don't know, 80 samples of bones. They try to radiocarbon date them and getting maybe 10 dates. And it was the case during my PhD where we actually processed maybe 200 samples at least, and we got like 50 dates. So yeah, preservation is an issue. And also many of these dates on extinct megafauna come from archaeological sites as well. So that's the human bias, I think, that most of this work has been done by archaeologists who are working in like the first people who came to the continent. So that's also a human bias, I think. They're the two kinds of biases. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. So let's proceed with this one maybe. Oh, of course. So next one is oh yeah. So is the vegetation change in Argentinian sites at about 11,000 years ago due to the rise of seafloor plants? And can you comment on the effects of the Great American Biotic Interexchange on the Quaternary extinction?
Oh, maybe I can say something. Yeah, I'm not sure about the Argentinian vegetation change. I'm sorry. Yeah, it might be. From my knowledge, yeah, these were always open landscapes and like grasslands, but yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it was due to the rise of C4 plants. I'm sorry. And the other question, well, the biotic interchange, I don't know where the date is now. Maybe somebody can help me, but it should be 3 millions of years ago, 4 millions. Where is the date of the closure of the isthmus now? But I think for these late quaternary extinctions, we are seeing like the latest extinctions. I'm not sure. Probably there were previous extinctions. Of course, there were like for the marsupials that were living here in South America before the exchange. But yeah, that was earlier than the extinctions we are talking about. We don't see, yeah, even if, like species interactions are not really discussed in this extinction event, and probably something that we should look at. But yeah, I'm not sure if some of these extinctions were due directly to the gabi. I would say no.
Yeah, and you're right, about 3 million years ago. So yeah, a bit earlier.
Yeah.
So go to another one. Great talk. I noted that the estimates last were thousands of years beyond the last occurrences. What were the assumptions used for your estimates of the phase and first appearance and last appearance dates?
Yeah, maybe I will go back this one. Yeah, so that method we use for calculating the lats and the fats, I don't know if you say it like that, but it's a method that takes into account the number of radiocarbon, in this case, radiocarbon dates, the number of radiocarbon dates you have, as well as the distribution of those dates like through time. So for example, sorry. here we go. So yeah, for example, you have like an estimate, right? Like a medium estimate and a distribution around each of these estimates. And like the spread of that distribution is related to the error bar sometimes associated with some of these radiocarbon dates, as well as the distribution in time. So let me see one that can be more clear. So for example, in this one for Hyperion, our data shows a cluster of dates here and another cluster of dates here, with one of them having a large error around it. And I think that's what that nature, like the nature of that record, is what is producing this large error around the estimate of last appearance dates. For example, for the case of the Pampas, sometimes we have like this is not the case, but at some point we, for example, did it just only for one species of cingulates, and we had like an estimate that was coming to 2000 years before present, and I think it was just an artifact of the record. For example, I don't know if I did explain it well, but maybe you can search for rim analysis and read the paper. It's by Bradshaw et al. 2012, I think, or 2016, something like that.
Okay. Right. So go for another one. Just be sure. Yeah, it is right. So the data set that you've compiled here is absolutely incredible. Do you think it might be precise enough to look for impacts of humans progressively hunting smaller and smaller megafauna as the bigger ones go extinct, basically fishing down the food web but on land?
Oh, I think I don't think they are precise enough yet. Yeah, I mean, this is impressive for South America, but it is still not enough to answer many of the questions we have. But yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I never thought about it, and even thinking about, for example, I'm not gonna go back, but I showed in a slide that we could detect how some of the taxa or some taxa seems to disappear earlier and other ones later. And in that group, it was, for example, Notiomastodon, that probably was one of the biggest ones. But on the other hand, the other large ones like Megatherium or Idimotherium, we don't have enough data to say precisely if they became extinct earlier or later still. So yeah, we have some of the big ones disappearing earlier from the record, but we still don't have enough data on all the big ones to maybe see what you are suggesting. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Again, if anyone wants to make a question, just drop them in the chat to our questions host. I think there's another one. Let's go for this one. Okay, so it's a long question. So does the changing climate in the Quaternary affect biogeographic barriers like the present day Wallace Line? If so, then would these have bottlenecked communities from reaching some level of allotry and accumulation of harmful mutation led to their eventual demise, an effect now hypothesized to be the cause of neonatal extinction?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Thinking about biogeographical barriers that could be moved, yeah, there are some in South America, like everywhere else. I'm thinking maybe on the arid diagonal, we have like going from the Atacama to southern Patagonia, that is like an arid band that moved due to climatic changes. But yeah, like to answer these questions, we don't have any ancient DNA information yet to answer something like bottlenecks and things like that. There are some studies that have used ancient DNA for southern Patagonia, again, because it's the best place to do it. And what they have detected, though, is some, for example, local extinctions of extant species that happened there, and the current populations we see of that species were ones that migrated again into the area. So for sure, there were changes in populations and maybe extinctions of some populations, but I don't have any information to answer something as detailed as this person is asking. I'm sorry. Yeah, there are a few examples with the camels, but yeah, I don't know anything in South America about bottlenecks and things like that.
Okay, and we have just one final question. This is a shorter one. So, how well preserved were the specimens you collected?
So for this project, for like my for our effort of radiocarbon dating, our radiocarbon effort, we didn't collect as many samples. I went to some museums to collect some samples, and we also got some samples from colleagues. So we had everything. And at museums, I saw a bit of everything. For example, I collected a few samples from caves from the Altiplano of Peru. Also a cold environment and coming from caves, and they were very well preserved. Like they look like they had died yesterday. Like amazing. And on the other hand, I also sampled some fossils from the Pampas, and no, they look dry and not good at all. And the same is happening with the sites we are excavating now. Both sites have not very well preserved collagen. So we are trying to extract, for example, from central Chile, which is a deposit. It was a lake deposit. So these animals were maybe trapped and they died in what was a lake shore. Yeah, they don't have any collagen. So it's very frustrating, but caves and cold sites and caves, the same that happens with the tundra, right? Or with Siberia, and all those places are the best place to preserve collagen and ancient DNA and everything. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all for now. If people have other questions and want to stay around for tea time, everyone is welcome to do that. I'm just going to take over the screen share to wrap this up. Okay, so thank you again, Natalia. It was an amazing talk. Learned a lot. It's a very interesting subject, so thank you very much. I would like to remind people about our weekly feedback survey, so please fill it out if you can. And just a reminder that next week is our last seminar in 2022, so please join us for a seminar in which we're going to be inviting Mario Bronzatti from the University of São Paulo. He's going to be talking about the origin of tympanic curing reptiles, a paleo evo devo perspective. So yeah, please join us. It's the last one in this year. Again, we invite you to participate on the 2022 feedback survey. You can scan the QR code or access the form via the link. And if you can stay around for tea time, we're going to talk about some of the stuff Natalia has been doing and answering some questions such as which is our favorite Pleistocene mammal. So, so yeah, thank you everyone for staying around. We're going to proceed to tea time in 2 minutes. We're going to have a short break for 2 minutes so everyone can go to the bathroom, grab something to drink, stretch your legs, and hope to see some of you soon. Bye-bye.